Jake Morrison stood at the observation deck of New Haven Colony, watching the mining ships return from their daily run to the asteroid belt. The massive vessels moved slowly through space, their cargo holds full of precious metals that would feed Earth's growing industries. As colony administrator, Jake had seen this sight thousands of times, but it never got old. Each successful mining run meant another day of survival for the 50,000 people who called New Haven home. The colony sat in the middle of the asteroid belt, built into a massive rock that had been hollowed out over decades of mining. Solar panels covered the surface, and the main habitat domes stretched deep underground. Families had been living here for 3 generations, and Jake's own daughter Emma was born in the colony's medical center 12 years ago. Jake's communication device buzzed with an incoming message. The screen showed Principal Mary Collins from Emma's school, and her face looked worried. "Jake, we have a problem," Mary said without her usual greeting. "There are ships in orbit, big ones. They just appeared out of nowhere." Jake felt his stomach drop. Unknown ships were never good news. He ran to the main control center, where dozens of technicians monitored the colony's systems. The large display screen showed the space around New Haven, and Jake could see them immediately. 5 enormous ships hung in the darkness, each one at least twice the size of the colony's largest mining vessel. "When did they arrive?" Jake asked. Captain Ryan Burke, who ran the colony's small defense station. "About 10 minutes ago," Ryan replied, his hands moving quickly over the control panel. No warning, no communication. They just appeared like they came out of hyperspace. The ships were unlike anything Jake had ever seen. They were long and thin, almost like giant needles, with a dark purple color that seemed to absorb light. Strange energy patterns moved along their hulls, pulsing like a heartbeat. "Are they hostile?" Jake asked. "Unknown. They're not responding to our signals, but they're not attacking either. They're just waiting." Dr. Lisa Hartwell arrived at the control center, still wearing her medical coat. As the colony's chief medical officer, she had left her work at the hospital as soon as she heard about the ships. Her 15-year-old son, Danny, was at school with Emma, and Jake could see the worry in her eyes. "Any idea what they want?" Lisa asked Dot before anyone could answer. The communication system crackled to life. A voice spoke, but it was strange and difficult to understand. The words were in English, but the pronunciation was wrong, like someone learning the language from a book. "Humans of this settlement," the voice said. "We are the Kithara. We come in peace. We require only what you can spare." Jake grabbed the microphone. "This is Colony Administrator Jake Morrison. What do you want from us?" "Your young ones," the voice replied. "The small humans with growing minds. We need them for important work. You will not be harmed." The control room fell silent. Jake felt his blood turn cold. Lisa grabbed his arm, her face pale. "Our children?" Jake said into the microphone. "Absolutely not. Leave our system immediately." "You do not understand." The alien voice continued. "We do not ask. We take what we need. Your young ones will serve a greater purpose." The ships began to move, slowly approaching the colony. Jake could see energy building along their hulls, crackling with power. "Red alert," Jake shouted. "All children to the emergency shelters immediately." The colony's alarm system activated, and red lights flashed throughout the tunnels. Parents grabbed their children and ran for the reinforced shelters deep underground. Jake's own daughter Emma was still at school, along with hundreds of other kids. "Ryan, can we fight them?" Jake asked. Captain Burke looked at his weapons display and shook his head. "We have mining lasers and some defensive missiles, but nothing that could scratch ships that size. They have energy shields that our scanners can't even penetrate." On the main screen, Jake watched as strange beams of light shot out from the yacht. Alien ships. But these weren't weapons. The beams passed right through the colony's walls, like they weren't there, and Jake realized with horror what they were seeing. "They're scanning for the children," Lisa whispered. The beams moved through the colony, and wherever they touched, Jake could see a faint glow. The aliens were somehow marking every child in New Haven, even those hiding in the deepest shelters. Jake's communication device buzzed again. This time, it was his daughter Emma, calling from the school's emergency shelter. "Dad, something's happening." Emma's voice was scared but trying to stay calm. "There are lights everywhere, and they're going through the walls. The teachers are trying to keep us together, but some of the kids are floating." "Floating?" Jake asked. "They're in these bubble things made of light. They can't move, and they're being pulled toward the ceiling." Jake watched the main screen in horror as the alien beams began to lift children right through the colony's walls. The energy nets held each child safely, but they were completely trapped. Parents ran through the corridors, screaming and trying to reach their floating children, but the beams were too high. "Dad, I can see the lights coming toward our shelter," Emma said, her voice getting smaller. "I think they're coming for us too." "Emma, listen to me," Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Stay calm. Stay with your teachers. We're going to get you back." But even as he said it, Jake knew there was nothing he could do. The colony's weapons were useless, and the alien ships were too powerful. He could only watch as more children were pulled up through the rock and metal toward the waiting ships. Dr. Hartwell was crying now, watching her son Danny floating in one of the energy bubbles. The boy was conscious, but couldn't move or speak. His eyes were wide with fear as he disappeared through the ceiling. Within 20 minutes, it was over. The alien ships had taken 147 children, including Emma and Danny. The Kithara leader spoke one more time. "The young ones will serve well," the voice said. "They have the minds we need. Do not follow us, or we will return for the rest." The ships began to move away from the colony, accelerating quickly toward the edge of the system. Captain Burke worked frantically at his controls, trying to track their departure. "I'm getting their quantum signature," Ryan said. "If we can analyze it, we might be able to track where they're going." Jake stood in the control room, surrounded by crying parents and shocked colonists. His daughter was gone, taken by aliens who spoke of her like she was a piece of equipment. The colony that had been his life's work now felt empty and broken. "Send a message to Earth Command," Jake said, his voice hard with determination. "Tell them what happened here. Tell them the Kithara have taken our children." As the alien ships disappeared into hyperspace, Jake made a promise to his daughter and to every parent in New Haven. Somehow, some way, they were going to get their children back. The Kithara had made a terrible mistake. They had threatened human children, and now they would learn what that meant. Commander Helen Roberts stood in the center of the weapons laboratory, surrounded by the wreckage of a Kithara scanning device. Her team had been working for 6 weeks to understand how the alien technology functioned, and they were finally making progress. The device had been recovered from New Haven Colony, damaged but still containing valuable information about how the Kithara systems worked. "The energy patterns are completely different from anything we've seen before," Dr. Paul Martinez explained, pointing at the readings on his screen. "They don't use solid matter the way we do. Everything is based on controlled energy fields." Helen nodded, studying the data. As head of Earth's new weapons development division, she had been given unlimited resources and the best scientists from every nation. Her job was simple: create weapons that could kill the Kithara and destroy their ships. "If their defenses are energy-based, then we need weapons that can disrupt energy," she said. "What about quantum torpedoes?" Dr. Martinez looked excited. We've been working on that idea. If we can create a torpedo that destabilizes quantum fields, it should tear right through their shields. The problem is building something that won't destroy our own ships when we fire it. Helen walked over to the testing chamber where her team had been experimenting with prototype weapons. Inside the reinforced room, they had built a replica of a Cathara energy shield using the data from the scanning device. Every test so far had failed to penetrate it. "Show me the latest design." Helen ordered. Dr. Martinez activated the quantum torpedo prototype. The weapon was smaller than traditional missiles, but it glowed with an eerie blue light that made Helen's skin crawl. When it struck the energy shield, something incredible happened. Instead of bouncing off like the previous weapons, the torpedo seemed to unravel the shield from the inside out. Within seconds, the entire barrier collapsed. "That's it," Helen said, smiling for the first time in weeks. "How quickly can we mass produce?" "These? Give us 2 months, and we can have 1,000 torpedoes ready for the fleet," Dr. Martinez replied. While Helen's team worked on weapons, Colonel Jack Thompson was training the soldiers who would use them. The first expeditionary force was being assembled at the military base on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. 5,000 of Earth's best soldiers had volunteered for what everyone knew was likely a suicide. Mission. Jack stood in the zero-gravity training facility, watching his troops practice boarding procedures. The soldiers wore new armor that Dr. Torres had designed specifically to resist Cathara energy weapons. The suits were bulky and difficult to move in, but they could keep a human alive in the vacuum of space and protect against alien scanning beams. "Remember, we don't know what the inside of their ships will be like," Jack told his squad leaders. "The gravity might be different, the atmosphere might be poisonous, and we don't know what kind of defenses they have. Stay together, watch each other's backs, and focus on finding the children." Sergeant Mike Davis raised his hand. "Colonel, what if the kids have been changed? The intelligence reports say the aliens are putting their minds into human bodies." Jack had been dreading that question. The truth was, nobody knew what condition the children would be in when they found them. Dr. Hartwell had prepared medical teams for the worst-case scenarios, but there were no guarantees that the children could be saved. "We bring home every child we find," Jack said firmly. "Whatever condition they're in, they're coming home with us." The training continued around the clock. Soldiers practiced fighting. In alien environments, medics learned how to treat unknown injuries, and engineers studied how to sabotage Cathara technology. Every person in the expeditionary force knew that they were preparing for the most important mission in human history. On Earth, Ambassador Carol Williams was pursuing a different approach. Her job was to contact other alien species and learn everything possible about the Cathara. Most alien races were reluctant to help, but Carol eventually found a species called the Zelani who were willing to talk. The Zelani were refugees, survivors of a Cathara attack on their homeworld 50 years earlier. Their leader, a being called Elder Voss, agreed to meet with Carol at a neutral space station near the edge of human territory. "Your species is young," Elder Voss told Carol through a translator device. "You do not understand what you face. The Cathara have been harvesting minds for thousands of years. They take the young from dozens of species." Carol felt her anger growing as she listened to the Elder's story. The Cathara had taken Zelani children and used them as hosts for their dying leaders. The process destroyed the original minds completely, leaving only alien consciousness in young bodies. "How do we fight them?" Carol asked. "Most species cannot," Elder Voss replied sadly. "The Cathara are too advanced, too powerful. They choose victims who cannot resist. Your species should run, hide, hope they do not return." "That's not an option," Carol said. "They have our children." Elder Voss studied her with large, dark eyes. "Then you will die trying to save them." The Kithara have never been defeated in battle. But Carol detected something in the alien's voice, a hint of hope that he was trying to hide. You think we might have a chance, don't you? Your species is different, Elder Voss admitted. The Kithara choose victims who are weak, who will not fight back, but they made an error with humans. You are young, but you are not weak, and you have something the Kithara do not understand. What's that? Rage, Elder Voss said simply. Pure, focused rage when you're young or threatened. The Kithara have never faced that before. Back in the Sol system, the fleet was taking shape. Admiral Walsh stood on the bridge of the UE's Vengeance, the new flagship that had been built specifically for the rescue mission. Around him, dozens of ships prepared for the longest military voyage in human history. Engineer Ben Clark had designed new systems for the ships that would allow them to travel faster and fight more effectively. The engines had been upgraded to cut travel time from 3 months to 8 weeks. The weapon systems could fire the new quantum torpedoes with devastating accuracy. Dr. Torres had created combat drugs that would enhance human reflexes and strength during battle. The soldiers called them Fury Pills because they seemed to amplify the user's anger and determination. Combined with the new armor, they would give human fighters a significant advantage in close combat. As the final preparations were completed, President Cross addressed the fleet in a broadcast that was transmitted across human space. She stood in the communications center, looking directly into the camera with steel in her eyes. 8 weeks from now, you will arrive at the Kithara homeworld, she said. Your mission is simple. Bring our children home. The entire human race is counting on you, and we know you will not fail. Admiral Walsh gave the order, and the greatest fleet in human history began its journey into deep space. 89 warships carrying the hopes and fury of an entire species, heading toward a confrontation that would determine the future of humanity. Jake Morrison watched the fleet depart from New Haven Colony, knowing that his daughter Emma was somewhere in the darkness ahead. The past 2 months had changed him, just as they had changed every human in the galaxy. The peaceful colonist was gone, replaced by a father who would do anything to get his child back. As the last ship disappeared into hyperspace, Jake made a promise to Emma and to every stolen child. The Kithara had started this war by taking human children. Now humanity was coming to finish it, armed with weapons they had never imagined and driven by a fury the aliens could not comprehend. Storm was coming, and it would be terrible to behold. Admiral Kevin Walsh stood on the bridge of the UE's Vengeance as the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kithara system. What he saw through the main view screen made his blood run cold. The alien homeworld was surrounded by massive orbital structures that stretched for thousands of kilometers in every direction. My God, whispered Captain Sarah Kim from the navigation station. How many facilities are there? Lieutenant Commander Tony Rodriguez, who led the fleet's reconnaissance squadron, was already launching scout ships to get a closer look. His small, fast vessels darted between the orbital platforms, their sensors recording everything they could detect. Admiral, you need to see this. Tony's voice came through the communication system 20 minutes later. The platforms aren't just military installations. They're processing centers, millions of them. The main screen filled with images from Tony's reconnaissance mission. The orbital platforms were enormous metal structures, each one the size of a city, but they weren't designed for living beings. They were factories built for one terrible purpose, transferring consciousness from one mind to another. Dr. Lisa Hartwell, who had joined the fleet as chief medical officer, studied the scans with growing horror. Each platform has thousands of chambers, she reported. The energy readings suggest they're all active. They're not just holding our children. They're processing victims from dozens of species. Admiral Walsh felt rage building in his chest as he realized the scope of the Kithara operation. This wasn't just about stealing human children. The aliens had been running a galactic harvesting program for centuries, stealing young minds from every species they encountered. "Tony, can you locate our children?" Walsh asked. "Working on it, Admiral. The energy signatures are complex, but I'm detecting human life signs on Platform 7. It's the largest structure, about 50 kilometers from the planet." On Platform 7, Scout Captain Tony Rodriguez piloted his ship through a maze of alien architecture. The structure was so massive that his small vessel looked like an insect flying around a skyscraper. As he got closer to the human life signs, his heart sank at what he discovered. The children were alive, but they were trapped in nightmare machines that were slowly stealing their minds. Tony could see them through the transparent walls of the processing chambers, floating in some kind of liquid that kept them unconscious. Alien devices were attached to their heads, gradually replacing human memories with Kithara consciousness. "Admiral, I've found them," Tony reported, his voice shaking with anger. "But we need to move fast. The process looks like it's about halfway complete for most of the children. If we wait much longer, there might not be anything left to save." "Admiral." Walsh made his decision instantly. All ships, battle stations, were going in. The Kithara had detected the human fleet as soon as it arrived, but they seemed confused by what they were seeing. Their ships began moving to intercept, but slowly, as if they couldn't believe that their victims had actually followed them home. "Commander." Helen Roberts stood in the weapons control center of the UE's Vengeance, her finger hovering over the firing. "Control for the quantum torpedoes." Around her, dozens of technicians prepared to unleash the most devastating weapons humanity had ever created. "Fire," Admiral Walsh ordered. The quantum torpedoes streaked across space like blue lightning, striking the Kithara ships with incredible force. The alien vessels had energy shields that had protected them for thousands of years against primitive weapons, but they had never faced quantum disruption technology. The first torpedo hit a Kithara cruiser, and the entire ship simply came apart. The energy that held its structure together unraveled in seconds, leaving nothing but debris floating in space. Within minutes, the human fleet had destroyed half of the alien defensive force. "Their shields are useless against our weapons," Commander Roberts reported with grim satisfaction. "The quantum torpedoes are tearing through them like they're made of paper." But the real battle was just beginning. Colonel Jack Thompson and his Storm Corps prepared for the most dangerous part of the mission, boarding the processing platforms to rescue the children. 5,000 soldiers in heavy armor crowded into assault ships, each one knowing that they might not survive the next few hours. "Remember your training," Jack told his troops as they approached Platform 7. "The aliens have psychic abilities, but your armor will protect you. Stay focused on the mission. Find the children and get them out." The assault ships crashed through the platform's outer defenses, their armored hulls tearing holes in the alien structure. Jack was in the first wave, leading his soldiers through corridors filled with strange machinery and alien technology. The Kithara defenders were waiting for them, but they were unprepared for human ferocity. The aliens were tall, thin creatures, with pale skin and large heads, clearly built for mental work rather than physical combat. Their psychic attacks bounced harmlessly off the soldiers' mental shielding, and their energy weapons couldn't penetrate the new armor. Jack's soldiers fought with a fury that the Kithara had never encountered. These weren't professional killers, fighting for money or territory. These were parents and siblings and friends, fighting to save children, and nothing in the galaxy could stand against that kind of determination. Sergeant Mike Davis kicked down the door to a processing chamber and found 12 human children floating in the nightmare machines. His own nephew was among them, barely recognizable after weeks of alien experimentation. "Get the medical teams in here now," Mike shouted into his radio. "And somebody figure out how to shut these machines off without killing the kids. Dr. Hartwell's medical teams worked frantically to free the children from the processing chambers. Many of the alien devices had to be carefully removed to avoid brain damage. Some children woke up screaming, their minds filled with fragments of alien memories. Others remained unconscious, their neural patterns scrambled by the consciousness transfer process. "We've got 20 children free from Chamber Block A," Dr. Hartwell reported, "but some of them are in critical condition. The aliens have done serious damage to their neural pathways." As the battle raged through Platform 7, Captain Burke made a disturbing discovery in the facility's central control room. The Kithara weren't just stealing minds randomly. They had been studying human children for months, cataloging them by intelligence and potential. "Admiral, you need to see this," Burke transmitted. "They've been ranking our children. The smartest ones are marked for special processing. They were planning to use the brightest kids as permanent hosts for their leadership tasks." The revelation sent the human soldiers into an even greater rage. The idea that the aliens had been studying their children like laboratory specimens, planning to steal the minds of the most gifted young humans, was more than they could bear. Thompson's assault team reached the high-security section where the Kithara kept their most valuable prisoners. Here they found the children who had been marked as exceptional, young geniuses, artistic prodigies, and natural leaders who represented the future of humanity. Among them was Emma Morrison, Jake's 12-year-old daughter from New Haven Colony. She was unconscious in a processing chamber, but the alien devices hadn't completed their work yet. Her human memories were still intact, though alien thoughts had begun to intrude into her mind. "We found her," Jack reported to Admiral Walsh. "Morrison's daughter is alive, but she's been partially processed. The medical teams need to work on her immediately." The battle for Platform 7 lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the human forces had rescued 2,100 children from dozens of species, including 1,847 humans. The cost was terrible. 400 Storm Corps soldiers had died in the fighting, and many of the rescued children were severely damaged by the consciousness transfer process. But for the first time in galactic history, someone had successfully attacked a Kithara facility and lived to tell about it. The aliens who had terrorized young civilizations for millennia had finally met an enemy that refused to be victims. As the human fleet prepared to destroy the remaining platforms, Admiral Walsh received a transmission from the Kithara leadership. The aliens were offering to surrender, promising technological exchanges and territorial concessions in return for peace. Walsh looked at the images of the rescued children, many of them still unconscious from their ordeal, and felt no mercy in his heart. The Kithara had made their choice when they decided to harvest human minds. Now they would face the consequences. "Denied," Walsh replied to the alien transmission. "You took our children. There can be no peace between us." The storm had arrived, and it would not stop until every Kithara installation in the system was reduced to burning wreckage. Admiral Kevin Walsh stood on the bridge of the UES Vengeance, watching as the final Kithara orbital platform exploded into burning debris. The alien homeworld hung before them, its surface dotted with cities that had stood for thousands of years. In 12 hours of continuous fighting, the human fleet had destroyed every military installation in the system. Dr. Lisa Hartwell worked without rest in the medical bay, treating the rescued children. Of the 3,000 who had been taken, only 2,100 had survived the liberation. Many bore scars that would never fully heal. Some had been so damaged by the consciousness transfer process that they remembered being aliens more clearly than being human. "How is Emma Morrison?" Admiral Walsh asked. When he visited the medical bay, Dr. Hartwell looked tired but hopeful. "She's one of the lucky ones. The process was only 30% complete when we found her. She has some alien memories mixed in with her own, but her personality is intact. She keeps asking for her father. In another section of the medical bay, Danny Hartwell was awake, but confused. Lisa's 15-year-old son recognized her face, but spoke in the clicking language of the Cathara. The alien memories were stronger in his mind than his human ones, and it would take months of treatment to restore his original personality. "Mom," Danny said suddenly, the word coming out in perfect English. For a moment, his eyes were clear and focused. "Mom, I remember you." Lisa held her son's hand, tears streaming down her face. "I'm here, Danny. You're safe now. We're going home." The moment passed quickly, and Danny's eyes became distant again. But it was enough to give Lisa hope that her son could be saved. "Colonel." Jack Thompson entered the medical bay, carrying a datapad with the final casualty reports. The Storm Corps had lost 627 soldiers during the assault on the processing platforms. Each one had died fighting to save children they had never met, from families they would never know. "The children are asking about their parents," Jack told Dr. Hartwell. "What do I tell them?" "Tell them they're going home," Lisa replied. "Tell them their parents are waiting." On the planet below, the surviving Cathara leadership had gathered in their capital city. For the first time in their species' history, they faced an enemy that had not only resisted their harvesting operations, but had actually defeated them in battle. High Consciousness Zektar, leader of the Cathara, sent another transmission to the human fleet. The alien's voice was different now, filled with fear instead of the arrogance they had shown during their raids on human colonies. "Human Fleet Commander." Zektar's words came through the translator with a desperate tone. "We offer full surrender. We will share our technology, give you star charts, provide resources for your expansion. Only spare our world." Admiral Walsh listened to the plea without emotion. Around him, the bridge crew waited for his response. These were the same aliens who had called human children empty vessels and primitive containers. They had shown no mercy when they were strong, and now they begged for mercy when they were weak. "Captain Burke, open a channel to all ships." Walsh ordered. The communication system activated, connecting every vessel in the human fleet. Walsh's voice would be heard by every soldier, every pilot, every medical technician who had come so far. "To rescue their children, people of Earth," Walsh began. "We came here for one purpose, to bring our children home. We have succeeded. But the question now is what to do with the species that stole them." Walsh paused, looking at the alien homeworld. On his screen, the Cathara have been harvesting young minds for thousands of years. They have destroyed the futures of countless species across the galaxy. They see other civilizations as nothing more than sources of raw materials for their experiments. In the medical bay, some of the older rescued children gathered around a communication terminal to listen to the Admiral's speech. Emma Morrison, still weak from her ordeal, held the hand of a younger boy whose memories had been completely replaced with alien thoughts. "They took our children because they thought we were weak," Walsh continued. "They thought we would accept their theft and move on, like so many other species before us. They were wrong." On the planet below, millions of Cathara waited in their cities, watching the human ships in orbit. They had built their civilization on the suffering of others, always choosing victims who could not fight back. Now they faced the consequences of that choice. "Today, the galaxy learns what happens when you threaten human children," Walsh said, his voice hard as steel. "The Cathara will survive, but they will never again travel to the stars. Their ships are destroyed, their technology is broken, and their ability to harm others is ended forever." The human fleet began its work of destruction with cold efficiency. Every spaceport on the planet was targeted with quantum torpedoes. Every shipyard, every research facility, every installation that could support spaceflight was reduced to rubble. The Kithara would survive as a species, but they would be trapped on their homeworld for generations. Commander Helen Roberts oversaw the destruction of the alien technology. Her teams planted explosives in the remaining orbital debris, ensuring that nothing useful could be salvaged. The weapons that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia would never be used again. "It's finished," she reported to Admiral Walsh. "Their spacefaring capability is completely destroyed. It will take them centuries to rebuild if they ever can." As the fleet prepared to leave the Kithara system, Captain Tony Rodriguez was given a special mission. His scout ship would remain behind, hidden in the outer system, to monitor the aliens and ensure they never again develop the ability to travel between stars. "Every ship that tries to leave this system will be destroyed," Tony was told. "The Kithara are prisoners on their own world now, and that's how they'll stay." The journey home took 8 weeks, but it felt longer to everyone on board. The rescued children needed constant medical care, and many of the soldiers struggled with what they had seen on the processing platforms. The images of children trapped in alien machines would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Dr. Monica Torres, who had developed the combat drugs and enhanced armor, worked with the medical teams to help the children recover. Some of them would need years of therapy to separate their human memories from the alien thoughts that had been forced into their minds. "The important thing is that they're alive," Torres told the families who had come to meet the returning fleet. "They're damaged, but they're alive and they're human. That's what matters." When the fleet finally reached Earth orbit, the entire planet celebrated. President Amanda Cross declared a week of Thanksgiving for the safe return of the children. But the celebration was mixed with grief for those who hadn't survived and anger at what had been done to those who had. Jake Morrison waited at the spaceport on New Haven Colony. As the transport ship carrying his daughter touched down, Emma walked slowly down the ramp, supported by a medical technician. She looked older than her 12 years, and her eyes held shadows that hadn't been there before. "Dad," Emma said when she saw him, and her voice was her own, not the clicking alien language that some of the other children spoke. Jake held his daughter tight, feeling the weight of the past 3 months lifting from his shoulders. She was alive, she was home, and she was still his little girl. Despite everything the aliens had done to her. As the families reunited with their children, news of the human victory spread across the galaxy. The species that had seemed so young and innocent had shown a capacity for violence that shocked even the oldest civilizations. The Kithara, who had terrorized weaker races for millennia, had been crushed by the fury of protective parents. Ambassador Carol Williams established the Children's Protection Protocol, a galaxy-wide network of human ships dedicated to preventing similar abductions. Any species that threatened human children would face the same fate as the Kithara. Captain Tony Rodriguez, now promoted to Admiral, commanded the Rapid Response Fleet that patrolled human space. His ships carried quantum torpedoes and soldiers, trained in the brutal lessons learned during the rescue mission. The message was clear. Human children were not prey to be hunted. Years later, when alien diplomats met with human representatives, they would ask about the Kithara system. The humans would show them the recordings of the orbital platforms, the consciousness transfer machines, and the children who had been rescued from them. "That is what happens," the humans would say, "when someone takes our children." The galaxy had learned a new truth about humanity. They appeared peaceful and reasonable, willing to trade and negotiate and compromise on almost any issue. But there was one line that could never be crossed, one act that would bring down the full fury of the human race. The Kithara had crossed that line, and their broken civilization served as a permanent warning to any species that might consider similar actions. Humanity's children were protected by something more dangerous than any weapon, the love of parents who would destroy worlds to keep their young ones safe. In the end, the aliens had been right about one thing. Human children were special, a zest of potential that was almost unlimited, but they had been wrong about everything else. Those children were not empty vessels waiting to be filled. They were the future of humanity, and that future was worth any price to protect. The transport ship landed on Nexus Prime with a loud thud that shook every passenger inside. Danny Cooper pressed his face against the small window and looked out at his new home for the next 6 months. The Galactic Defense Academy stretched across the horizon like a massive metal city. Tall buildings reached toward the purple sky, and strange vehicles moved between them like insects. "Would you look at that place?" Jake Morrison said from the seat next to him. Jake had been talking non-stop since they left Earth 3 days ago. "I bet those alien instructors are going to eat us alive." Danny nodded, but stayed quiet. He always preferred listening to talking. Around them, 20 other human cadets were getting ready to leave the ship. Most of them looked nervous. Some tried to hide it by talking loud or making jokes. Danny just watched and waited. The ship's door opened with a hiss, and Commander Lisa Barnes stepped inside. She was a tough woman in her 40s who had been training soldiers for 15 years. Her uniform was perfect, and her voice cut through all the noise. "Listen up, cadets. In 5 minutes, you will step outside and become the first humans to train alongside alien species in the history of our galaxy. Some of those aliens think we are weak. Some think we are stupid. Some think we don't belong here at all." She looked each cadet in the eye. "They are wrong. But it's not my job to prove that. It's yours. You will show them what humans can do through your actions, not your words. Do I make myself clear?" "Yes, ma'am." 21 voices answered together. Danny followed the others out of the ship and into the alien air of Nexus Prime. The gravity felt almost the same as Earth, but the air smelled different. It had a metallic taste that made his nose wrinkle. The sun was bigger and more orange than Earth's sun, and it made everything look strange. Other transport ships were landing around them. From one ship came creatures that looked like giant insects walking on 2 legs. Their black shells shined in the orange light, and their forearms moved in ways that made Danny dizzy to watch. From another ship came tall, thin beings that seemed to be made of living crystal. They sparkled as they moved, and made musical sounds when they talked to each other. The biggest group came from a ship that looked like it was made of black metal. These creatures were clearly reptiles, but they walked upright like humans. They were bigger than most humans, with thick scales and yellow eyes that seemed to see everything. Their leader was the biggest of all, nearly 7 feet tall with scars across his face and arms. "That must be Zexthil," Jake whispered to Danny. "I heard he's never lost a fight in his whole life." Commander Barnes led the human group toward a large building in the center of the academy. As they walked, Danny noticed how the other species looked at them. The insect creatures made clicking sounds that might have been laughter. The crystal beings watched them with what seemed like curiosity. The reptiles just stared with those cold yellow eyes. Inside the building was a huge room with a high ceiling. Hundreds of cadets from different species filled the space. The humans were clearly the smallest group. Danny counted maybe 50 humans total, compared to what looked like 200 aliens. A voice boomed across the room, speaking in perfect English. "Welcome to the Galactic Defense Academy. I am Instructor Zexthil, and I will be in charge of your physical training." The big reptile stepped forward onto a raised platform. His voice was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together. "For the first time in our history, we are training together as one force. Some of you come from worlds with heavy gravity. Some from worlds where survival requires great strength. And some," his yellow eyes found the human group, "come from worlds that have made them soft." Jake's face turned red, but Danny put a hand on his friend's arm to keep him calm. "Today, We will see what each species brings to our alliance, Zexthil continued. We will start with a simple test of physical strength. Several alien cadets moved large metal weights into the center of the room. The smallest weight looked like it weighed at least 100 kilograms. The largest was easily twice that size. Zexthil pointed to one of the insect creatures. Kai, run. Show us what your people can do. The insect cadet stepped forward with quick, jerky movements. She wrapped her 4 arms around a weight that had 200 kilograms marked on its side. With a sound like breaking twigs, she lifted it over her head and held it there for several seconds before setting it down gently. The reptile instructor nodded with approval. Excellent. Veltar, your turn. One of the crystal beings approached a different weight. This one was marked 180 kilograms. The crystal alien placed his hands on the weight and seemed to focus for a moment. Then he lifted it smoothly, his body making soft musical notes as he moved. One by one, alien cadets demonstrated their strength. The smallest weights they lifted were 150 kilograms. Most lifted 200 or more. The room filled with approving sounds from Zexthil and the other instructors. Finally, the reptile instructor turned to the humans. Now let us see what Earth's children can offer. Commander Barnes stepped forward. Morrison, you're first. Jake walked to the weights like he was walking to his own execution. He chose the smallest weight available, marked 100 kilograms. He grabbed it with both hands, took a deep breath, and pulled. The weight came off the ground, but Jake's face turned, red with effort. He managed to lift it to chest height before setting it back down, breathing hard. Acceptable for a human, Zexthil said in a voice that made it clear he thought it was barely acceptable at all. 3 more human cadets tried. The same weight. 2 managed to lift it. 1 could not. The alien cadets were making more clicking and musical sounds. Danny was pretty sure they were not compliments. Cooper, you're up. Commander Barnes called. Danny walked forward quietly. The room seemed to get quieter as he approached the weights. He was not the biggest human in the group. He was not the loudest or the most confident. Most people back on Earth never noticed him unless he wanted them to. He looked at the weights for a moment. The 100 kilograms weight that had given Jake so much trouble sat next to a 150 kilograms weight that none of the humans had even tried. Danny rapped his hands around the heavier weight and lifted it off the ground. It came up easily, like he was lifting a bag of groceries. He raised it over his head, held it there for a moment, then set it down gently and walked back to his group without saying a word. The room was completely silent for several seconds. Then Zexthil's voice cut through the quiet. Adequate for a human, he said, but his yellow eyes stayed on Danny longer than they had on the others. Cooper will join the remedial physical training group. We must bring all humans up to minimum standards. Danny said nothing. He just nodded and returned to his place next to Jake, who was staring at him with wide eyes. Dude, Jake whispered, how did you make that look so easy? Danny shrugged. It wasn't that heavy. But across the room, the crystal being called Veltar was watching Danny with great interest. Unlike the others, Veltar had noticed that Danny had lifted 150 kilograms like it weighed nothing at all. The crystal alien made a soft musical note to himself and decided to keep watching the quiet human cadet. As the demonstration ended and the cadets were dismissed to their quarters, Danny walked quietly beside Jake through the corridors of the academy. The alien cadets moved around them, still making their clicking and musical sounds. I don't think they like us very much, Jake said, looking at a group of reptile cadets who were staring at them. They don't know us yet, Danny replied in his quiet voice. Give them time. Time for what? Danny looked around at the alien species that filled the hallway. Each group stayed with their own kind, eyeing the others with suspicion or dismissal. The humans were clearly seen as the weakest link in this new alliance. "Time to see what we can really do," Danny said simply. He had no idea that very soon he would give them exactly that chance.